Elena Vasquez stepped off the transport ship and looked around Kepler Station's main dock. The air smelled different here. Like metal and electricity mixed with something sweet she couldn't name. Hundreds of beings moved around her, and not one looked anything like a human. A tall creature with blue skin and 4 arms walked past, carrying 3 bags at once. Another being that looked like a walking crystal formation glided by without making any sound. Elena pulled her single travel bag closer and tried not to stare, but everything was so strange and wonderful. "You must be the human," a deep voice said behind her. Elena turned around and had to look up, then up some more. The creature standing before her was enormous. It had green and brown scales covering its body, yellow eyes that never blinked, and teeth that were definitely made for eating meat. It stood at least 8 feet tall, maybe 9. Its muscles bulged under the scales like it spent every day lifting heavy things. "I'm Elena," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I am Thekvar, senior combat instructor at the Galactic Training Academy." The reptilian being looked down at her with what might have been amusement. "I have been assigned to oversee your training." "That's very kind of you," Elena said. Thekvar made a sound that might have been laughter. "Follow me, small human. We have much work to do." As they walked through the station, Elena noticed how other beings stared at her. Some pointed with whatever they used for hands. Others whispered in languages that sounded like music or static or grinding metal. A few just stopped what they were doing and watched her pass. "They have never seen a human before," Thekvar explained without looking back. "Your species is new to galactic society. Very new." The academy was bigger than any building Elena had ever seen. The ceilings were so high she couldn't see them clearly. Corridors stretched in every direction, filled with beings of every shape and size. Most were much larger than Elena, though a few were smaller. Thekvar led her to an office that was clearly made for someone his size. The chair behind the desk could have fit 3 humans. The desk itself came up to Elena's chest. Thekvar sat down and gestured for Elena to take a smaller chair that had obviously been brought in just for her. "I have studied your species extensively," Thekvar began, pulling up a holographic display. Images of humans appeared in the air between them. Humans are carbon-based mammals, with very limited physical capabilities. Your bones are hollow, like birds. Your muscles are weak compared to most galactic species. Your reflexes are slow. Elena frowned. "Hollow bones? I don't think that's right." "The data is quite clear," Thekvar continued, waving a clawed hand. "Humans have soft skin that tears easily. You cannot see in the dark. You need to eat frequently. You are, essentially, one of the most fragile species we have encountered." The hologram showed human soldiers from centuries ago, wearing bulky armor and moving slowly. They looked small and scared next to their alien allies. "This is why I have volunteered to personally oversee your combat training," Thekvar said, his chest puffing out with pride. "It will be a challenge, certainly, teaching combat to such a delicate species, but I am confident I can at least teach you to defend yourself in the most basic situations." "I appreciate that," Elena said carefully. "We will start with very simple exercises, wooden swords perhaps, or foam padding. We must be extremely careful not to injure you." Thekvar stood up, towering over Elena again. The other instructors said it was hopeless, that humans are too weak for combat training. "But I believe every being deserves a chance to learn, no matter how limited their natural abilities." Elena followed Thekvar through more corridors. Other students were everywhere, and Elena began to understand why everyone thought humans were weak. She saw beings with skin like rock, others with metal growing from their bodies. One student was lifting weights that must have weighed a ton, just for warm-up exercises. "That is Crix," Thekvar said, pointing to a student that looked like a giant insect. "His species has natural armor and can lift 50 times their body weight. Very impressive." They passed a practice area where 2 students were fighting. One looked like living lava, the other like animated shadow. Their weapons moved so fast Elena could barely see them. Sparks and dark energy flew everywhere. Combat here is somewhat different from what humans might expect, Thekvar explained. Most species have natural weapons. Claws, spikes, acid, energy projection. Humans have none of these advantages. Elena nodded and kept walking. She was starting to understand the problem. Everyone here expected her to be weak and helpless, because the records said humans were fragile. But the humans in those old records looked nothing like the people Elena had grown up with back home. "Here is your dormitory," Thekvar said, stopping at a door marked with symbols Elena couldn't read. "Rest tonight. Tomorrow, we begin your training. I have designed a special program just for humans. We will start with basic movements, very slowly. Nothing that might strain your delicate bone structure." Elena's room was small but comfortable. A window showed the stars outside. More stars than she had ever seen from Earth. She sat on the bed and thought about what Thekvar had told her. Hollow bones, weak muscles. That didn't match anything Elena knew about humans. Back home, she had been considered average, not especially strong or fast, just normal. But here, everyone expected her to be made of glass. She pulled out her personal datapad and sent a message to her family back on Earth. She told them about the academy, about Thekvar, about how everyone thought humans were incredibly weak. Her little brother would probably laugh when he heard that. Just last month, he had accidentally bent a crowbar while helping their father fix the farm equipment. Elena stretched and prepared for bed. Tomorrow would be interesting. Thekvar seemed nice enough, even if he was completely wrong about humans. Maybe she could show him that humans were a little tougher than those old records suggested. Just a little. Elena woke up early and made her way to the training grounds. She had studied the academy map on her datapad, but actually walking through the massive complex was different. Everything was built for beings much larger than humans. Doorways were twice as tall as they needed to be. Handrails were too high to reach comfortably. Even the floors felt strange under her feet, designed for creatures with different gaits. The training area was enormous. The ceiling disappeared into shadows far above. Training platforms floated in mid-air, held up by anti-gravity generators. Weapon racks lined the walls, filled with swords, staffs, and devices Elena didn't recognize. Some weapons glowed with their own light, others hummed with barely contained energy. "Ah, the human arrives," Thekvar called out. He was already there, warming up with movements that looked like a deadly dance. His muscles rippled under his scales as he spun and struck at invisible enemies. Punctual. That is good. Several other students were training nearby. Elena watched a being made of living crystal practice with a sword that seemed to be made of pure light. Another student, covered in spikes like a walking cactus, was throwing energy discs at moving targets. Everything they did looked impossibly fast and powerful. "Now then," Thekvar said, walking over to Elena with a training sword in his hand. "Let us begin your education." The sword looked normal enough, except for the soft glow around the edges. Thekvar held it easily in one hand, even though it was nearly as long as Elena was tall. "This is a standard training weapon," he explained. "It is made from a special alloy that can withstand tremendous force. The energy field around the blade makes it safe for practice, but it still behaves like a real sword in terms of weight and balance." Elena reached out to touch the weapon. It felt warm, and she could feel a slight vibration in the metal. "Of course, we will not start with these," Thekvar continued quickly. "They are far too heavy for human bone structure. I have ordered special lightweight training weapons for you. Made from carbon fiber and foam. Much safer." "What about that one?" Elena asked, pointing to the sword in his hand. Thekvar chuckled. "This weighs approximately 40 pounds, and is designed for beings with superhuman strength. If you tried to lift it, you would likely injure yourself." By now, other students had noticed them and were gathering around. Elena heard whispers in a dozen different languages. The universal translator in her ear picked up fragments. "That's the human. Look how small it is. I heard they break if you look at them wrong. Why is it even here?" Thekvar seemed to enjoy the attention. "Gather round, students. Today you will witness something unprecedented." Combat training for the galaxy's most physically limited species. A student who looked like he was made of living metal raised what might have been a hand. Instructor Thekvar. Is it true that humans cannot regenerate lost limbs? Completely true. Thekvar replied. Humans heal very slowly and cannot regrow damaged body parts. This is why we must be extremely careful. Another student, this one resembling a giant spider, spoke up. My species databanks say humans cannot see heat signatures or sense electrical fields. How do they fight when they are essentially blind? Excellent question, Thekvar said, puffing up with pride. Humans are indeed sensory limited. No natural weapons, no enhanced senses, no regenerative abilities. It is quite remarkable that they achieved spaceflight at all. Elena listened to this with growing confusion. The humans they were describing sounded nothing like anyone she knew. Her grandfather had lost an arm in an accident when he was young. But everyone said that was unusual. Most people healed from injuries fairly quickly. And while humans couldn't regenerate limbs like some animals, they certainly weren't as fragile as glass. Now observe, Thekvar continued. As I demonstrate the basic sword forms, pay attention to how slowly and carefully I move. This is how one must train a human. He began a series of movements with the training sword. Even though he claimed to be going slowly, his blade moved faster than Elena could easily follow. Each strike would have shattered stone. Each block would have stopped a charging vehicle. Despite his claims about being gentle, power radiated from every movement. Notice how I keep my strikes well away from the human. Thekvar lectured. Even the wind from a proper sword stroke could knock a human unconscious. The watching students murmured approval. Elena was starting to feel like an exhibit at a zoo. The human bone structure cannot handle sudden impacts, Thekvar went on. Their joints are particularly vulnerable. A movement that would be normal for any of you could permanently cripple a human. Elena cleared her throat. Excuse me, but could I maybe try holding one of those training swords? Just to see how heavy it is? The watching students gasped. Several stepped back, as if Elena had suggested juggling live explosives. Absolutely not, Thekvar said firmly. As I explained, these weapons are far too heavy for human physiology. You could tear muscle, break bones, or worse. But how will I learn to fight if I can't hold a weapon? We will start with foam replicas, perhaps wooden sticks. We must build up your strength gradually over many months before attempting anything more substantial. One of the students, a being that looked like an upright wolf, spoke up. Instructor, perhaps the human could observe our training instead? It might be educational. An excellent suggestion, Thekvar agreed. Observation is probably the safest form of training for a human. Elena felt frustration building inside her. Back home, she had trained with her family in traditional combat forms that had been passed down for generations. She had practiced with real weapons since she was old enough to hold them safely. Her parents had taught her to respect weapons but not to fear them. I really would like to try, she said quietly. Absolutely impossible, Thekvar declared. I will not be responsible for injuring the first human to attend this academy. We will stick to safe, controlled exercises designed specifically for your species' limitations. The watching students nodded sagely. Elena could see in their eyes that they were already writing her off as a curiosity rather than a real student. They looked at her the way she might look at a small child playing with toy weapons. Elena took a deep breath. Maybe she could prove that humans weren't quite as fragile as these old records suggested. Maybe tomorrow Thekvar would let her at least hold a training weapon, just for a moment. Elena arrived at the training grounds the next morning to find an even larger crowd waiting. Word had spread about the human student, and beings she had never seen before were gathering to watch. Some held recording devices. Others were taking notes on datapads. A few academy instructors stood at the back, watching with scientific interest. Thekvar was clearly enjoying the attention. He had set up a display of various training weapons, all arranged neatly on a floating platform. At the far end were weapons so massive Elena wondered how anyone could lift them. At the near end were items that looked more like toys than weapons. Welcome, students and faculty, Thekvar announced, his voice carrying across the training area. Today we begin the historic first combat training of a human being. Applause rippled through the crowd. Elena felt her cheeks growing warm. This was nothing like the quiet training sessions she had imagined. As you can see, Thekvar continued, gesturing to the weapon display, I have prepared a complete range of training implements appropriate for various species and strength levels. He picked up a sword from the large end of the display. Even holding it casually, his muscles strained. The weapon was clearly incredibly heavy. This is designed for Class V species, beings with natural superhuman strength. He set it down and moved along the display. This is for Class 4 species, still quite powerful, but more manageable. The weapon he picked up was smaller, but still looked formidable. Class 3 for species of moderate physical ability. Another sword. Quote, this one more reasonably sized. Class 2 for smaller, quicker species. The weapons were getting noticeably lighter and simpler. And finally, Thekvar said with a theatrical flourish, Class 1 training implements. Designed for the most delicate and fragile of galactic citizens. Things. The some were mink. The weapons at this end of the display looked like they were made for children. Foam padding covered everything. The blades were clearly fake, made of soft plastic. One was obviously inflatable. Now, human Elena, Thekvar said, we will start with these specialized training aids. Elena looked at the foam sword he was offering her. It was bright yellow and had cartoon characters printed on the side. One of the watching students was trying very hard not to laugh. Actually, Elena said carefully, could I just try one of the regular training swords? Just to see what it feels like? The crowd murmured. Several beings shook their heads in amazement at human foolishness. Absolutely not, Thekvar said firmly. I have explained the dangers. These weapons are designed to withstand impacts from beings who can crush stone with their bare hands. A human attempting to wield such a weapon would be like an insect trying to lift a tree. But what if I'm stronger than you think? Elena asked. This brought actual laughter from the crowd. Elena heard comments in a dozen languages, all expressing the same sentiment. Humans thinking they were strong was apparently the funniest thing anyone had heard all week. My dear child, Thekvar said in a voice that was probably meant to be kind, I have studied human anatomy extensively. Your species has a maximum grip strength of perhaps 200 pounds per square inch. Your bones are hollow to reduce weight. Your muscles are primarily designed for endurance, not power. These facts are not opinions. They are scientific measurements. Elena looked around at the sea of alien faces, all staring at her with mixtures of amusement and pity. She had tried to be polite. She had tried to go along with their assumptions. But this was getting ridiculous. One try, she said quietly. Just let me hold one of the training swords for 1 minute. If I can't handle it, I'll use the foam ones. Thekvar looked around at the crowd. Elena could see he was enjoying being the center of attention. The wise instructor dealing with a stubborn student. Very well, he said dramatically. Perhaps a demonstration of the reality of the situation will be educational for everyone. He walked over to the Class 2 section of the display and picked up a training sword. It was clearly one of the lighter weapons, designed for smaller species. But even this one looked substantial and solid. This is our lightest combat-rated training weapon, he announced to the crowd. It weighs approximately 15 pounds and is made from reinforced polymer alloy. It is designed to withstand forces up to 2 tons without damage. Elena could hear beings in the crowd whispering excitedly. Some were placing bets on how quickly she would drop the weapon or hurt herself. Now, human Elena, Thekvar said, holding the sword out to her. Place both hands on the grip and try to lift it. When you find you cannot manage it, we will return to appropriate training methods. Elena reached out and took the weapon. Her fingers wrapped around the grip easily. The sword felt warm and solid in her hands, with that same slight vibration she had noticed before. There, Thekvar said smugly. As you can see, she requires both hands just to. Elena lifted the sword with one hand. It felt comfortable, well balanced. The weight was noticeable but not problematic. Like holding a baseball bat. Or maybe a heavy hammer. That's unexpected, Thekvar muttered. But simply lifting it does not mean, how do I activate the energy field? Elena asked, examining the weapon. The what? You should not be able to. The energy field activates automatically when the weapon detects proper grip pressure. But that requires. Thekvar's voice trailed off as a soft blue glow appeared around the sword's edge. The crowd was completely silent now. Elena could see confusion and surprise on every face. This was clearly not going according to anyone's expectations. Perhaps a simple striking motion? Elena asked politely. Just to test the balance? A gentle motion, Thekvar said quickly. Very gentle. The practice targets are designed for much stronger beings. Elena nodded and moved into a basic stance her grandfather had taught her. She raised the sword and brought it down in a controlled, precise strike at the practice dummy in front of her. The sound of metal screaming filled the training area. Elena looked down at the training sword in her hands and saw that the blade had bent completely in half, folding like a piece of paper. The reinforced polymer alloy, designed to withstand forces up to 2 tons, was now shaped like the letter U. Elena looked up at Thekvar's shocked face. Did I do something wrong? The silence stretched for what felt like hours. Elena stood holding the bent remains of the training sword, looking from Thekvar's shocked face to the equally stunned crowd. Several beings had their mouths hanging open, which was particularly impressive for species that didn't normally have mouths. That is not possible, Thekvar whispered. Elena turned the bent weapon over in her hands. I'm sorry. I thought you said it was designed to be tough? 2 tons of force, Thekvar said numbly. That weapon was rated to handle impacts of up to 2 tons of force without damage. A commotion broke out in the crowd. Beings were talking rapidly in their various languages, pointing at Elena and backing away. Several instructors pushed through to get a closer look at the ruined weapon. Instructor Thekvar, a crystalline being said urgently, we need to get this human to the medical bay immediately. Medical bay? Elena asked, confused. I feel fine. There must be some explanation, another instructor said. This one looked like a walking tree with far too many eyes. Mechanical enhancement. Genetic modification. Some form of technology we're not detecting. Within minutes, Elena found herself surrounded by medical staff and scientists. They guided her to the Academy's medical center. Chattering excitedly among themselves, Elena caught fragments through her translator. Impossible bone density readings. Muscle fiber composition doesn't match the database. These reflex speeds are unheard of for a baseline species. The medical bay was filled with equipment Elena had never seen before. Scanners hummed and beeped as they examined her from every angle. Doctors with tentacles, claws, and various sensory organs she couldn't identify took readings with instruments that glowed, sparked, and made strange sounds. Subject appears to be baseline human, one doctor announced. No cybernetic implants detected. No genetic markers for artificial enhancement. But the bone density, another protested. These readings show calcium carbonate structures 3 times denser than our human database indicates. And the muscle efficiency ratings are completely off the charts. These fibers should not be able to generate this level of force. Elena sat on an examination table that automatically adjusted to accommodate her size and species. Is there a problem? Dr. Krillith, the chief medical officer, approached with what Elena assumed was a reassuring expression. It was hard to tell with a being who looked like a cross between an octopus and a computer. Human Elena, Dr. Krillith said in a voice like musical chimes, we are simply trying to understand how you accomplished what we witnessed in the training area. I just hit the practice dummy like Instructor Thekvar asked me to. Yes. But the force required to damage that training weapon. According to our calculations, no baseline human should be capable of generating such power. Elena thought about this. What exactly does your database say about humans? Dr. Krillith activated a holographic display. Images of humans appeared in the air, along with streams of data. Elena recognized the same outdated information Thekvar had shown her. These records come from the first human expeditions into galactic space, Dr. Krillith explained. Approximately 400 years ago. When your species first achieved faster-than-light travel, Elena studied the images. The humans in the records looked familiar but somehow different. Smaller, maybe. Less. Solid. Yes. These brave pioneers established first contact with galactic civilization. Our medical and biological databases were compiled from detailed studies of those early human explorers. But that was 400 years ago, Elena said slowly. Indeed. Quite recent in galactic terms. Most species maintain the same baseline characteristics for thousands, even millions of years. Elena stared at the holographic data. Doctor, what planet do your records say humans come from? Earth, obviously. Sol system, third planet, standard gravity and atmospheric composition. Standard gravity? Elena asked. What's standard gravity? Dr. Krillith consulted the display. 9.8 meters per second squared. According to these measurements. Quote, Elena tried to remember her academy physics lessons. That's about what we call Earth normal, I think. But most human worlds have higher gravity than that. The medical staff exchanged glances. Higher gravity? Well, yeah. Earth was settled first because it was easy. But most of the colony worlds had heavier gravity. More resources. Better mineral deposits. That kind of thing. My home world has about twice Earth gravity. Some of the mining worlds have 3 times Earth gravity or more. Dr. Krillith's tentacles began moving rapidly over various controls. Elevated gravity environments would necessitate significant physiological adaptations. And the colony worlds had different challenges. Elena continued. Dangerous wildlife, harsh weather, toxic atmospheres that needed to be terraformed. Humans had to get tougher to survive. 400 years of natural selection in high-stress environments, another doctor murmured. Increased bone density for heavy gravity. Enhanced muscle efficiency for survival situations. Improved reflexes for dangerous conditions. Plus the genetic engineering programs, Elena added absently. The room went completely quiet. Genetic engineering programs? Dr. Krillith asked, carefully. Oh, you know, the usual stuff. Disease resistance, improved healing, enhanced physical performance. Nothing too dramatic. Just basic survival improvements for colony life. Elena noticed that every being in the room was staring at her. Is that not normal? Human Elena, Dr. Krillith said slowly. These early records show no evidence of genetic modification capabilities in human civilization. 400 years ago? Yeah, that makes sense. We were pretty primitive back then. Dr. Krillith's tentacles were practically vibrating with excitement. You are saying that modern humans are significantly evolved beyond the baseline humans in our database? Well, I wouldn't say significantly. We're still basically the same species. Just improved, I guess? Adapted for the worlds we live on now. More medical staff were rushing into the room. Elena could hear excited conversations happening in multiple languages. The universal translator was having trouble keeping up. This changes everything, someone was saying. We need to contact the Galactic Council immediately. The military implications alone. Wait, Elena said, starting to understand. You've been thinking all humans are like the ones from 400 years ago? Of course, Dr. Krillith replied. Species don't normally evolve noticeably in such short time frames. Elena thought about her family back home. Her little brother who could lift engine blocks. Her grandfather who had worked in the deep mines for 60 years. Her cousin who had survived a cave-in that would have killed anyone from Earth's early history. I think, Elena said quietly, there might have been a misunderstanding. The Academy's main amphitheater had never been so crowded. Beings from across the galaxy had arrived within days of the news breaking. Representatives from the Galactic Council sat in the front rows. Military officials filled entire sections. Scientists and researchers occupied every available space, with more joining by video link from distant worlds. Elena stood on the main platform, wearing a new combat harness that actually fit her. The equipment technicians had been forced to build it from scratch, using specifications for what they called Category X beings, species capable of superhuman feats of strength. It felt strange to be grouped with beings like the rock crushers from Titan Prime and the metal shapers of the Forge worlds. HFY stood beside her, but his role had completely changed. Instead of her instructor, he was now officially her first student. The proud Saurian had adapted to the new reality with surprising grace. Though Elena could see he was still processing everything. Honored delegates, Director Zal then announced from the podium. Today, we witness a historic revaluation of human capabilities. Elena tried not to fidget as hundreds of alien eyes focused on her. She had never wanted to be the center of attention like this. All she had wanted was to learn combat techniques and maybe make some friends. As you have all seen from the reports, the director continued, our understanding of human physiology was based on severely outdated information. Modern humans represent a species that has undergone rapid adaptation and enhancement over the past 4 centuries. A holographic display showed the comparison data. Old humans versus new humans. The differences were dramatic when laid out side by side. Bone density, muscle efficiency, reflexes, healing rates, sensory acuity. Every measurement showed significant improvement. The implications are staggering, the director said. What we thought was the galaxy's most physically limited species may actually be among the most capable. And Elena watched HFY from the corner of her eye. He was taking notes frantically, muttering to himself about training regimens and combat applications. To demonstrate these capabilities, the director announced, human Elena has agreed to participate in a series of exhibitions. The first test was simple. Elena walked over to the combat demonstration area, where a series of training dummies had been set up. These weren't the regular academy targets, but military-grade equipment designed to test the abilities of the galaxy's elite warriors. Elena picked up a proper combat sword. Not a training weapon this time, but a real blade designed for Category X beings. The weight felt good in her hands. Familiar, somehow, even though she had never held anything quite like it. The target is rated to withstand impacts from beings capable of lifting 5 tons. The director explained to the watching crowd. Elena moved into a combat stance. In the silence of the amphitheater, she could hear her own heartbeat. She thought about her training back home, about her grandfather's teachings, about the generations of humans who had learned to be stronger because they had to be. She struck. The target didn't just break, it exploded. Pieces flew across the platform as the entire structure collapsed. Elena stood in the debris, sword still humming with energy, looking slightly embarrassed. That wasn't supposed to happen, she said. The crowd erupted. Beings were on their feet, talking excitedly, recording everything. Elena heard fragments of conversation in dozens of languages, all expressing the same amazement. The second demonstration involved reflex testing. Elena stood in the center of a circle, while automated systems fired harmless energy pulses at her from random directions. The challenge was to deflect or dodge each pulse within the split second after it fired. The system started slowly, firing 1 pulse every few seconds. Elena deflected them easily with her sword. The speed increased. 2 pulses per second, then 5, then 10. Elena moved like water, her blade seeming to be in multiple places at once. At 20 pulses per second, the crowd was completely silent, watching in awe. At 30 pulses per second, several military officials were taking urgent notes. At 40 pulses per second, the system finally overwhelmed her, and a pulse got through, striking her harmlessly on the shoulder. Previous record was 15 pulses per second, the director announced quietly. The final demonstration was a sparring match. Elena had requested this one herself. She wanted to show that humans weren't just strong, but that they could learn and adapt in real combat situations. Her opponent was Commander Vextar, the Academy's champion fighter. He was from a warrior species known throughout the galaxy for their combat prowess. He stood 9 feet tall, had natural armor plating, and had never lost a match against any opponent from any species. I will be careful not to injure you, young human, Commander Vextar said as they prepared to fight. Thank you, Elena replied. I'll try to be careful too. The match began slowly, with both fighters testing each other's abilities. Commander Vextar was clearly holding back, throwing gentle strikes that Elena easily deflected. Elena responded with equally controlled movements, not wanting to hurt her opponent. "You may increase the intensity," Elena called out. Commander Vextar nodded and began fighting more seriously. His strikes came faster, harder. Elena matched his pace, then began to exceed it. Their weapons rang against each other with increasing volume and speed. The crowd watched in fascination as Elena not only kept up with the galaxy's premier fighter, but began to push him back. Her movements were fluid, adaptive. She learned from each exchange, incorporated new techniques on the fly, and began combining them in ways that surprised even herself. The match ended when Elena's blade stopped just inches from Commander Vextar's throat. Both fighters were breathing hard, but Elena looked like she could have continued for hours. "Remarkable," Commander Vextar said, lowering his weapon. "Your species learns exceptionally quickly." Later, as the formal presentations concluded and the crowd began to disperse, Elena found herself surrounded by military recruiters, academy officials, and beings offering various opportunities. She politely declined most of them, explaining that she just wanted to finish her education. Thekvar approached with a new group of human students who had arrived that morning. Word had spread quickly, and humans from across colonized space were requesting admission to the academy. "Elena," Thekvar said, his pride obvious, "I would be honored if you would help me develop a new training program. For humans, obviously, but also for any other species that wishes to learn human combat techniques." Elena looked at the eager faces around her. Young humans who had grown up on high-gravity worlds, mining colonies, and frontier settlements. Each one adapted in their own way to the challenges of their environment. Each one stronger, faster, and more capable than the galactic community had ever imagined possible. "I'd like that," Elena said. "But I think we should probably update your database first." The amphitheater was finally emptying, but the conversations continued in corridors and meeting rooms throughout the station. Elena could hear the excitement in dozens of voices, planning new training programs, new military strategies, new diplomatic approaches. Humans were no longer the galaxy's weakest species. They might very well be among its strongest. And Elena, who had only wanted to learn how to fight properly, had become the bridge between what humanity was thought to be and what humanity had actually become. She picked up her practice sword, a new one, specially reinforced, and headed back to the training grounds. There was still so much to learn.